This is a conversation with Nicole Markowski, manager in corporate development at Wipfli. She started her career in consulting and IT with an engineering background and now has transitioned to managing M&A integrations. This interview is about the importance of relationships in M&A, something that doesn't get talked about very much. We covered identifying key people to build relationships with, approach to developing relationships, importance of delegating tasks in building relationships, handling resistant groups, how to address people problems. Great conversation. This episode is sponsored by our business lines. Deal Room. Welcome to Deal Room, where managing M&A feels less like a rocket ship and more like a walk in the park. It's the M&A platform that does it all, but without the drama. Efficient pipeline management? Check. Swift due diligence? Double check. Smooth integration? Triple check. Say goodbye to those endless training marathons just to upload a file. Deal Room is as user-friendly as your favorite social media app. Join the club of M&A superheroes like Block, Emerson, Broadcom, who've already sped up their M&A activities with Deal Room. Learn more by visiting dealroom.net. Again, that's dealroom.net. Firm Room, the virtual data room platform where high security doesn't mean high complexity. Imagine a VDR that's as simple as your favorite app, but with the security of a bank vault. Say goodbye to ridiculous per-page billing and those sneaky hidden fees. We're not fans either. Signing up is quicker than making a cup of coffee. Less than 2 minutes and you're in. Check out a free trial at firmroom.com. Again, that's firmroom.com. Let's jump into the conversation with Nicole. Nicole, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm great. I got to tell you, I went out and I looked for speakers on this topic from the biggest, the baddest, the best. And none of them wanted to come on and talk about relationships and M&A. So I got to applaud you for stepping up and taking the time to cover this topic with me today.
Absolutely. Well, relationships are super important to me, so I'm happy to cover the topic.
Hey, can we kick things off with a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. So I graduated from Marquette University. I studied biomedical engineering with a minor in mechanical, so very different from where I ended up. Out of school, I went to Accenture, so I became a systems and technology analyst in their new graduate program. My first introduction into M&A, I was actually working on a project where the number 2 and number 3 pharmacy benefit managers had merged together. So during the integration, as you can imagine, there were a whole bunch of hot projects. They had decided to create one new system and bring all of their data into that system. And so I was project managing a lot of their hot projects to get the systems up and running. So I did that for about a year and a half. And that was truly my dousing into the M&A world. So I got sick of traveling every Monday through Thursday. So I decided to move to Wipfli in their CRM consulting space. I didn't spend a whole lot of time on this team. I actually was working with our internal IT team on the internal implementation of CRM at Wipfli. So I started to develop a lot of deep relationships with people in the IT team. And that led to the leadership of our IT team kind of taking notice of my project management skill set and offered me a role within their team to kind of help set up and run the M&A process for IT. At that time, M&A was becoming a very, very strategic initiative for Wipfli. We had done a couple M&As in the past, but it was really becoming part of the forefront of our strategy. And so I spent 5 years in that role with our IT team, setting up, running, and kind of redefining IT's integration processes. So during that time, I got to build relationships with a lot of people across the firm, from the M&A partner at the time to, our HR leads, our finance leads. So I learned a whole lot about how Wipfli works. As M&A continued to kind of grow and flourish within Wipfli, the M&A partner at the time created the role that I currently hold. So my role has morphed a little bit as our team has grown, which is awesome. And current day, our team has 4 people, and it's led by Bob Cottingham, who is Wipfli's corporate development partner. So the role that I currently hold right now, I'm really currently responsible for setting up and kind of running proactive prospecting of candidate firms that Wipfli may be interested in with my colleague, overseeing due diligence from our corporate teams and the client-facing teams, and ensuring that corporate integration is complete. So when I say corporate integration, I mean, they're on a Wipfli computer, they're getting paid by Wipfli, they're in our benefits. And then my peer kind of takes it from there for the integration of our client facing, so our practice and growth side. So that's a little bit about my history.
That's like the best intro I think I've had. It's terms of being very succinct. I'm still stuck at the bioengineering part.
Yep.
But yeah, I've just been fascinated. I always find that a really interesting background I've noticed from leading practitioners, whether corp dev or integration, to have some form of engineering. And then you moved into the tech integration space, working externally in a consulting environment, then internal. Now you're in this current role, and it sounds like you've got a pretty blended responsibility between diligence and integration.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as my role evolves, as I continue to look out into the future, eventually, I want to start learning some of the fundamentals of how we value firms, our valuation model, all of kind of the negotiation. So that's forward looking for me. But it's really exciting. Every day is different for me, and I'm really supported by the leader of M&A at Wipfli to take ownership and make things better at the firm.
You want to run the corp dev function. I love that.
Eventually, that would be the goal. Yes.
I love it. How important are relationships in M&A?
Yeah, I mean, to me personally, relationships are everything. But what I've found in M&A is it truly makes everything better when it's at the forefront. So from a professional services firm, the way that we do acquisitions is a little bit different maybe from some other ways of doing it. Talent and clients are number one priority for us, right? So we want to retain that talent. I mean, we are acquiring these firms because we truly want their people and we also want their clients. So in order to make both of that work, we have to build relationships, right? We cannot allow these firms to run as subsidiaries because that doesn't provide us the value in the deal. So to us, we have to have those relationships built between our side and the incoming firm side, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of tough issues that come up in M&A, and having hard conversations when we're talking about short-term pain for longer-term gains is made a lot easier when you have that trust initially built with the other side.
So there's going to be challenges, and knowing that you got to have a good relationship to work through those challenges.
Absolutely. I mean, and another part that causes issues in M&A is uncertainty, right? So a lot of the anxiety inducing reactions from both, our firm as well as the incoming firm comes from uncertainty. So to me, uncertainty can be a little bit more tolerable when you've taken the time to build that positive relationship, to lay the foundation of trust, because then you're not making an assumption that the party is coming with ill intent when you're making decisions. You already have that solid foundation of, hey, we are in this together. We are one team. Yes, this is going to be painful for the short term, but this decision is being made with the most positive intent in mind.
And then the trust part is like a huge element that you want that, because if you're going to be driving changes as part of your investment thesis, and that trickles down to your talent of the company you're acquiring and the customers.
Absolutely. I mean, starting from the top, if you don't have the trust of the top leadership of that firm, how can you expect them to turn around, announce to their associates, and get their associates on board if they don't trust you? I mean, that to me is just almost impossible.
Can we break down the key people to have the relationships with? Because I'm already thinking about the lawyers and consultants, but let's
Yeah. So from a corporate development perspective, for us, a top priority is having a relationship with the executive leadership of the firm that is coming into Wipfli. So these are typically the people that really have made the decision that they are ready to sell into Wipfli. So that's a phrase you'll hear from me, is we're looking for firms to sell into Wipfli, not sell out of their current business. So we need them to have the positive intent, right? We need to build a relationship with them because they're the foundation of that message to their firm once it's announced to their associates. So that's really step one. It also makes it easier if we take the time to build relationships with those executive leaders, to set expectations, to have hard conversations of, hey, the first 6 months is going to be really, really tough for your people, but know that we are here to help you through this. And if you don't have that positive relationship with the executive leadership, they're not going to come to you with issues, and then things can spiral out of control. So that's one really important group. To me, the second important group is the executive leadership within our firm. So the way our corporate development function works, right? We have to work very closely with our executive leadership team because they have a view of the whole company, whereas we only have a slice of the strategic plan, right? So we need to rely on them for changes in the strategic plan. We need to inform them of changes in the M&A market. And so us really being in tight connection with each other and always collaborating is huge. We also have to prepare our executive leadership when we acquire a firm, because we're a firm that truly cares about the people that are coming into our organization, and to show that our executive leadership team does engage with them. So if it's an on-site firm, if they have, a big on-site presence, our executive leadership will be out there. They'll take the time to talk to the associates, right? They're the ones presenting during the announcement. And so it's our job to make sure that our executive leaders are appropriately prepared for those conversations. I have a couple more groups. So the leads of our integration teams and due diligence teams is a huge one for me specifically. I work with these people day in and day out. And if I haven't done my job at building relationships with the people in our firm, they're not going to trust me when we have to make tough decisions, right? Or if we're making a decision that puts more work onto their plate, because they don't understand the intent behind it if I haven't taken the time to lay that trust foundation and maintain that positive relationship with them. Another big part of my job is to challenge people to think differently, right? That's a lot harder to do if you don't have a good relationship with someone. So when I'm asking clarifying questions, when I'm challenging them on assumptions, it can be really hard if I haven't had the time to build that relationship with them. And as I've said before, tough conversations are always easier when you have a positive relationship with someone. A couple more groups, so the acquired people. This one can be a little bit harder depending on the size of the firm, but our team members like to take the time to get to know the people that we're acquiring, to sit down with them at lunch, to learn a little bit more about what they do, to be there physically if we can on site, supporting them through these integrations to see, oh, hey, you're a human just like I'm a human, and you're here to help me. You're not forcing this awful decision of change on me. You're here to walk this alongside me. Another one is brokers. I know we talked about this during the open office hours, but I truly see an amazing path forward if corp dev functions are able to build a positive relationship with the broker if they have an opportunity to. Because what we've found is brokers are able to manage their clients a little bit better, right? So manage the expectations of what this process is going to look like, manage the expectations of the amount of time that the people have to spend during due diligence and negotiation. And if you don't have that foundational relationship with the broker, it makes the process really, really difficult and actually impedes the process and likely will draw out timelines. So those are kind of my main groups of people that are extremely important to keep relationships with.
And the lawyers.
Yeah, we do have internal and external counsel. So that's a little bit more out of my purview right now. But eventually, that will be something that's vitally important to maintain and build that relationship with our internal counsel as well as our external counsel, because we do use both during our transactions.
Okay, so let me make sure I got this right.
Yes.
The gold is the talent you're acquiring and the customers, but you're not accessing them right directly. You really focus on this executive leadership team because they're essentially going to be the conduit to really relay the message to the talent and the customers. That's why you have a big prioritization right there.
Yep.
And then from there, you have your own executive leadership team making sure they're completely aligned on the strategic plans. And if there's any changes you're seeing in the market, you're getting on the synced on the same page. And then you mentioned the various diligence and integration leads that could be across the spectrum of functions that you got to ultimately have a strong working relationship to be able to go execute together as a team. That means having a rapport so that when you have the tough conversations, it's easier to do. And whether versus you have it with somebody you don't know as well, it may take a little different way or defensive.
Yep.
And then we talked about the acquired employees, when if you get a chance to really face with people that are directly coming on the team, and then the bankers, and then others, miscellaneous.
Yeah, I mean, and I've got a little bit of a cool story about the acquired firm employees. So when I was in my IT role, we had acquired, I want to say 5 to 6 firms in the Chicago area. So that kind of built out our presence in the Chicago market. So the first acquisition we ever did in Chicago, it was pretty bumpy. We went through a lot of technology hiccups, but we were able to overcome them on site. And about 3 years later, as we were bringing a bunch of offices together, the admin staff actually remembered me and ran to give me a hug during the kind of office consolidation, just because I had taken the time to sit down with them, to walk them through even the simplest, 5 mouse clicks to get where they need to go. People remember that. They remember you for the time that you took and the kindness that you show to them during times of really challenging, integration steps.
Can we talk about these individually? Because what I want to understand is the how you actually foster and develop relationships, and if there's different approaches with these different groups.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point on the different groups, but I will say the first point I want to start out with is at Wipfli, to me, our culture and our cultural training are unique compared to other firms and companies that I've seen. So what I mean by that is Wipfli started this kind of culture training based on the Arbinger training of outward mindset. So outward mindset is basically turning your chair and understanding the impacts of your own actions on someone else, right? So if I'm completing this action, is that impacting my direct report? Is that impacting my peer, right? So having that awareness of the people around you and the actions that you're taking and the potential consequences of those actions. The second element of our culture that makes building relationships honestly very easy within Wipfli is we have this practice called meet to learns. So a meet to learn is used both internally and externally with clients. So we tend to use this language with our target firms as well. And a meet to learn is basically a conversation. You're coming into the conversation with the intention to learn from the other party. So the practice is encouraged by leadership. It's encouraged across all areas of the firm to really sit there. And from a client perspective, what this shows is that we're listening to the needs of our client. We don't show up to the meeting assuming that we know what they need, right? So the intent of a meet to learn or a meet to give, we use both. The intent of a meet to learn is you're curious about what someone else is doing. You're curious about their challenges. You're curious about their role. You're curious about their world. And when you start to view, when you learn more, when you see people taking the time out of their day, even 30 minutes to get to know you, that just is an easy way to develop a relationship, is by listening. So that's kind of the first point of like the general of why it's so easy for me to build relationships at Wipfli. For our internal teams, as well as the incoming firm executive leadership, for me, over communication. So it's hard to keep everyone on the same page in the very chaotic world of M&A. So over communicating when I find something out. So let's say that I found out something from our HR team that I know is going to impact IT and may impact finance. You can bet I'm going to include both of these teams, even if it's may have an impact, because I find that keeping people on the same page is truly vital to success. And to me, I do think that that's a piece of helping build and maintain that relationship with both my team members as well as the incoming firm executive leadership. Listening to others, I kind of went over that, right? So making sure that you're truly listening to others, not just pretending to listen to them. You have to truly listen to them and then use your emotional intelligence skills to be able to assess and respond to what they're saying. So if I'm noticing that one of my team members maybe is having a really bad day, I have to use my emotional intelligence to kind of figure out, is this the right time to have this discussion, or is this something maybe we should discuss on a day where they're not feeling super overwhelmed? So to me, that just shows respect for the individual and where they're at. And if it's not a super urgent topic, then we can talk about it at a different time. So kind of that respect between people. Let's see, giving credit where credit is due is another one for me. So everyone that's involved in our M&A process knows that we have an open door. If you have an idea, if you're seeing something that isn't working well, bring it up. It would be super easy for me or my other team members to claim credit for that, but I don't think that's fair. I think that if you're asking a good challenging question, if you're challenging an assumption, if you're thinking outside the box, that should be rewarded and that should be called out. And that's part of kind of cultivating that positive culture within our M&A team and building that trust to build others up. A key piece for all of the groups is seeing people as unique human beings. So we're all very different, right? We have different interests. We approach problems in different ways. We think about things differently. And so taking the time to get to know someone, to understand the context of where they're coming from, to understand, what are their hopes and dreams, to listen to a vent. To me, being able to acknowledge someone as the unique human that they are, and when able, adapting your style to the way that they best either learn or respond is an amazing way to be able to start that trust journey with someone. I just think that that's vitally important for all areas of the stakeholders. One tactic that I truly love is asking clarifying questions. So if you ask me what my brand tagline is my name's Nicole Markowski and I have a million questions. I'm just a naturally curious person. So one way for me to truly build relationships with people is clarifying a question and or confirming understanding. So it may seem a little weird, but building that trust really comes from seeking to understand and then confirming that you see what they said in the same way that they see it by kind of restating what they had said in your own words. To me, that goes a really, really long way with building trust with anyone, is taking that time to show that you respect their opinion and that you're trying to understand where they're coming from. I'm trying to think. I think my final one is honesty and expectation setting. So this one is probably more at the executive leadership level of both our firm as well as the incoming firm and brokers and bankers. So knowing that there are boundaries of honesty in the workplace, right? We can't all be completely open, especially around confidential matters. It's great when you can be as honest as possible and then set expectations where appropriate. Because let's say I had an expectation of the broker to be managing their client, but the broker doesn't normally operate that way. If I haven't said that expectation out loud, how are they going to trust me, right? If I'm expecting them to do something that I haven't outright said. So to me, honesty and expectation setting is almost more on the forefront, but also could be part of the maintaining relationships.
I'm going to take one of your techniques to summarize and demonstrate. I've been listening, or
Perfect.
to listen here. I did like where you started with the impact of your own actions to others. But that gets forgotten. I feel like it's so relevant in M&A.
Yeah.
It will go back to the empathy, which comes up again. So that was a key theme I really liked. Then also that meeting to learn, that really having this compelling level of curiosity to want to learn genuinely, over communicating, which we really, really want to alleviate the risk of under communicating by over communicating.
Yep.
And then the truly listen to the point when you're really getting inside their head, essentially empathizing with the person to get a sense of how they feel, why they feel that way. Having this cordial level of respect in the way you commerce your communications, the open communication, asking the clarification questions, and then also the honesty and expectation setting on what's to come.
Yep.
The key ones I picked up, and I want to get an example of how do you turn this into a practical, right? Because you may have this institutionalized as part of your company culture, which I get sense of it is.
Yep.
And then when you're working with a counterparty and say, going back to this executive leadership team, is there anything that we could practically do to set the tone, whether it's for the specific meeting or just the commerce of doing this transaction together?
I think so.
What do you do to say to establish that?
Yeah. So even if you don't in your organization necessarily have the same cultural values that promote that relationship building that Wipfli does, I will take the example of the incoming firm leadership like you laid out. So as we get close to and or sign that LOI, we basically flat out say, hey, we would like to ideally have an in-person meeting with you for a day and a half, if you can swing it. And during this meeting, what we want to do is we want to get to know you, right? We want to get to know your firm and maybe expectations that you have of our firm during this process. We lay out expectations of what we expect from them in the process, not only following the process, but the kind of face, for lack of a better word, of what the messaging that they have to give to their associates. So to me, up front, if you can say, we want to be with you in person, you are important enough to us to spend a day and a half of our work life, right, to travel to you, to sit down and help educate you on the process, help lay out expectations, understand what you expect from your side. And then ideally, if you can have like a more informal dinner, lunch, something like that, to truly get to know them as people, that's a great way to kind of set the stage of, we care about you and we care about building this relationship. And I write all of this in an agenda. It is a written out agenda. This isn't just like a spoken, we tell them that, we want to do something like this. We are going to be expectation setting. We're going to be educating you on the process, and we expect you to come with your expectations of us so that there aren't any surprises in the end.
That's a good example of expectation setting right there. Is to set expectations about setting
expectations. It's the expectation setting, yes.
I like the getting to know the people. So there's effort of just, like, if you break that down, I feel like there's very formal ways of, hey, let's go grab coffee or lunch or sit in a conference room. And you go informal. Let's grab a drink. Let's dinner. I don't know what else you can do. Hopefully people are doing fitness activities. Let's go play golf or something, or tennis.
A walk, maybe. If it's
I should pick that one back up. Let's go for a walk. Where do you know, is there a strategy with that in terms of how do you approach building that relationship? How quickly do you escalate it? Because I usually just ask people for alcohol. I feel like if I can get them drunk, I can get everything I want out of them, but that might not be the best approach.
Yeah. So usually we ask them if they would be interested, especially in that first meeting. We ask, are you interested in going to dinner with us? So a little bit more of a formal approach in the beginning to kind of let them know we're interested in spending time with you outside of, the walls of this organization. We were more than happy to field, questions about work during that time, but truly kind of try to set the tone of, we want to get to know you during this dinner and you as a human, not you as the individual at work. So we tend to start out with more formal approaches of a dinner. And then maybe it goes a little bit more into informal. So for instance, during our associate announcements, while I may not be presenting, I may be present just so that I can kind of mingle around at lunch, right? Talk to some of the people, see what they're having heartburn about, take an interest in what they do at the company. How many years have they been there? How do they like, the city that they live in if it's a new market for us? So more of those informal approaches of, when we're doing structured things, we can also take an informal way of trying to get to know people by having enough people on site to spread out and have conversations with people. Because if you have one person there, you can't get to everyone, right? So it's important for us to have enough people out there to build relationships across that firm.
Wow. There's like a whole strategy of how you're deploying people and who
There absolutely is. I mean, in the IT world, I had it down to a science of how many people we needed to support a certain size and or type of firm when we were bringing them in from an IT perspective, right? I was assessing how tech savvy are they, right? Are they able to join these meetings? So for instance, we've definitely had transactions where you can tell their people just aren't tech savvy. They've been handheld in tech. They had someone sitting in their office that could walk over and physically do the fix for them. And unfortunately, that's not how Wipfli is staffed. You know, we're an international firm. And so we've got a centralized help desk area. And so I knew that if the technology knowledge of that incoming firm was low, we were going to need more support people, right? Because we're completely ripping apart their technology world when we give them their new Wipfli computer. I mean, they've got to relearn where their data is. They have to learn a whole new practice management system to enter time and expenses. Their email is going to look different. They have to put their email signature back in. It's extremely overwhelming. And so on the flip side, if I noticed that it was a more tech savvy firm, we might staff down, but have virtual support available for them. So to me, it's all about assessing the characteristics of the unique firm that you're acquiring and adapting to the needs of that firm.
On the people assignment of relationship development or accountability, can you give me an example, like using even the IT integration? How would you plan that out and saying, all right, we're going to integrate their systems and here's the people involved. Here's who you should be making relationships. Like what did that end up mapping out to in the example of an IT?
Yeah. So I'll take an example of a traditional firm. So let's say we had a traditional CPA services type firm that we were acquiring that was low on the technology savviness scale. And let's say they had about 35 people. So the first thing that we had to do is we need to figure out how challenging is the actual process of integration going to be, right? So how many pieces of software do we have to bring over and install on their new computer? How much data are we migrating from their servers onto ours? Is there any super unique setups for the desk? So for instance, in some of the acquisitions, we like completely redid the entire desk. I'm talking mounting monitors, plugging in docking stations, right? Making sure that the computers physically worked with everything at the desk. That requires a next level of on-site hand support, right? To be able to complete all those desks at the same time. So then I looked at kind of more of the what types of questions are they likely to have? So if they're really heavy on, let's say, CCH document, and they're going to be coming into our caseware, we know that's going to be a level of change that we need to staff up for, right? We need to have maybe 3 people there instead of 1 person there in a firm that's going from caseware to caseware. So it's, to me, if you want me to keep going, I can into the detail, but it's all about understanding where are the specific, how much time are you going to have to spend on specific tasks during the actual IT integration weekend? And then what is the profile of the clientele, basically? And do you need to staff up a couple people because you think that one person's likely going to be sitting at someone's computer for 2 hours? Or can we staff down a little bit more because it's just going to be a quick question about, I need to click this button? Did that help answer the question?
I appreciate the example. This is the very thing of why I both love and hate M&A.
Yep.
And it goes back to the thing, like you can't just create a checklist and go get this done. There's so much these variables they have to tailor to on every single deal.
Yep.
And listening to Nicole teach you a lot of good things about that. Could you give me an example? Okay, so let's say we planned that out. At least we had this mapping of the people and who's doing what. Mm-hmm. In terms of working with that leader and positioning them in terms of what the expectation is or approach for them to build relationship with people at that target company. Any key things there that you frame up to get that person at least knowing what they're supposed to do?
I'm trying to think back. I don't know that we had a truly formal process for that, although I could see where a more formal kind of training, or the lovely word expectation setting for the people going on site. What we ended up doing is, as we had people on site, we were taking note of the people that the incoming firm was responding to. So if there was someone that was always raising their hand, because usually we would sit in a conference room, right? And we would let people know, hey, if you have an issue, if you have a question, come into the conference room and ask us the question. So what myself and the leadership of IT started to do was notice the people that were raising their hands to go help the individuals, and then taking stock of how did that interaction go, right? So getting a summary of, did they get the issue resolved? Was it a bad interaction? Were they yelling at you? All of that kind of stuff. So kind of taking stock of the skill set of the individuals on our team. And then honestly, what it morphed into is the people that had the skill set that were great, both technically and with people, ended up coming on M&As more. Right. So I think naturally we just started to gravitate towards the people that were excelling in that environment versus the people who maybe weren't as comfortable talking to people, which again is totally fine. Not everyone is a people person, but we needed the people front and center when we were on site supporting the staff. Now, what I could see being helpful is almost like a kickoff call, right? So the week before everyone goes on site, hey, this is going to be a really stressful 5 days. We understand tensions are going to be very high. You are representing not only our firm, but you're representing IT. So we need to keep positivity front of mind. We need to be accommodating to these people, right? We've got to be organized and we have to be responsive. So almost having, again, everything goes back to expectations for me. Having that initial conversation to set them up for success of what we're expecting of them from support, to me, could go a really long way.
I think I have gotten the Nicole Markowski framework of relationships in M&A. I'll run it by you because I might have to touch it up a little bit. First and foremost, you're developing relationships with the key executives early because you want to develop them as champions for the messaging and things of that sort, but you don't jump right into it. You really spend the time to build that relationship and trust with them.
Yep.
Then you're essentially providing the messaging that you would inherently like them to replay to the broader company and broader team. And also as well as important for you to just get to know them generally so that you understand what their working approach and culture is like. And then from there, this is where expectation setting really clicks in. That as you progress and you have your meetings, you're even setting expectations about setting expectations, really driving it in. So it's super, super clear, but also welcoming the other side an opportunity to add to that initiative to keep making things as clear as possible. And then the other leg would be the strategy piece that, and I put that at the end because I think it really evolves because now you're moving through the deal and you're identifying more and more people and you're learning them. And that's where you start mapping this out and to get that coverage or the broader thinking about how relationships are going to need to be there to cover all these activities that need to get executed on ultimately.
Absolutely.
You're going to have to like break that down further, then come back and teach it as a course at some event.
I like it. I feel like we could work on that.
I did my part. There you go. Who is the most important person to have relationships with in the acquired company?
Yes. So it's so hard to just pick one, but honestly, I keep going back to the leadership of that firm that is coming into Wipfli. That leadership team, again, this is under the assumption that they were a great leader in their organization and they have the respect and attention of the people underneath them, right? This all kind of blows up if that's not the case. But to me, that is the leader of the organization, right? And that is the person that we keep going back to. They are the one that has to positively message this. They are the one that potentially has to deliver some bad news about a short-term decision and why it's going to be better for the long term. I mean, they are truly the head of change management for their people, because as much as we want to be those people, and eventually we will be once we've had the time to develop the relationship out of the gate, we don't have the trust of those employees, right? But that leader should. And so for us to set that leader up for success, we have to build a relationship with them. We have to coach them, and we have to make sure that they are appropriately prepared to deal with the situations that are going to come up in M&A. So to me, that is the most important factor in success of the integration, because the instant that that conversation starts to turn negative from that leader to their associates, what do you think the associates are going to think of it, right? I mean, if they trust and respect that leader, and the leader is saying, well, yeah, they decided to make this decision, but I don't agree with it. Great. Now we're all the way back to the beginning of the change management scale. I mean, we have zero adoption, no buy-in. They don't even want to do it at that point. So it's truly important that that leader keep a positive tone even through tough messaging.
I want to talk to you about dealing with assholes. Now, I want to point out that they could appear in any group, right?
Yes.
They could be on the executive team.
Yep.
They could be one of the attorneys, one of the bankers. They could be on your own team. So what's your approach? Like, how do you handle that? Because they can really make it miserable for not only yourself, but whole groups of people.
1000%. And I can tell you, we have run into this situation probably on every single M&A. Like you said, it can show up in any group of people that you're working with. Personally, I kind of take those on as a personal challenge. So my competitive side comes out a little bit, assuming that I need to keep a long-term relationship with them. So let me qualify that. If we're talking about a broker banker that maybe we are interested in keeping a long-term relationship with, I'm going to do my darndest to try to build that relationship with them and show them that I am a reliable person. I am listening to what they are saying, but they also have to respect and listen to what I'm saying. On the other side, if this is going to be a long term, like if they're coming into Wipfli and they're going to be, one of my coworkers for the long haul, it may be a little bit of a different approach. So to me, I'll start with the broker side. So if I can, on a call, let's say that we all end up joining early and we can have a little bit of small talk. Let's say that they're in California and I'm in Wisconsin. I can kind of razz them if it's the middle of winter, like, don't even tell me about your weather because it's snowing and, -40 here. So trying to bring like a little bit of humor with small talk to get them to loosen up a little bit. I mean, I try to go back to that, see each individual as a unique human being. So I try to start understanding, why are they having these actions, right? Do they feel, this is going to sound harsh, do they feel stupid because they don't understand the new change? Are they just so stuck into their own ways and they're unwilling to compromise in certain areas? So what I would try to do in that situation is, okay, we can do it your way, even though it's going to cause some hardship on our side, but then we're going to need you to do it this way for this other item that may cause a little hardship on your side. So almost trying to take that more compromising route, to me, for the short-term relationships can work. Now, there are definitely going to be situations where I have not been able to build relationships with people. I'm not going to say that I've been able to build relationships with every single person that has come, either I've worked with in a transaction or has come through a transaction. And if it's a shorter term relationship, then it's business, right? Then we're right down to business and we're going to do what we need to get done and we're going to work together in a professional manner. And that's where it's going to rest. And that's fine.
I was thinking what might be helpful is actually if we defined assholes, because I was thinking about that when you're describing potential approaches, that there's actually a variety. I have a few in mind, maybe to start off with. I always feel like the people that completely lack self-awareness, right? Whether in their leadership role and just, and they get defensive about it. Like they can't be wrong about anything. And it inverts into a blame on somebody else and things of that sort. I know there's going to be a lot more personalities around this that we can cover because there's, again, it's all broad. I mean, there's that one. There's the one acting on pure selfishness. And then there's just the hard-headed ones, ones that just aren't they're resistant to any change. They're just, the worst is the ones that say they're going to get something done. They don't get something done.
Yep.
That's the worst. But I don't know, am I missing something? Those are kind of my thinking when it comes to this profile.
I would agree with that. And I think each one may require its own different style of trying to break through and build a relationship. So I would say for the person that doesn't have self-awareness, being able to have maybe an individual conversation one-on-one to me is a lot easier than if we're in a group setting. So for instance, let's say that this individual was going off in a meeting about something and they weren't being professional, right? Their speak was not professional. You could tell that they just weren't getting it. They weren't picking up on context clues. To me, it's the afterward, the reaching out, hey, I noticed in this meeting, it seemed like you were either really upset or really frustrated with this issue. Is there something going on? Because to me, it didn't seem like it was that big of a deal. Can we talk about it, right? Can we get to the bottom of why this is frustrating you so much? So again, it comes back to that Arbinger, right? The turn your chair, the meet to learn, the try to dig a little bit deeper, ask those questions, and maybe you can dig up. Maybe they're having a really bad day. Maybe one of their top performers quit. And so now they don't have the mental capacity to be able to kind of separate out what's professional and not professional. So that to me is kind of taking that step back and having that individual conversation is huge for that scenario, as well as, what did you say the second one was? So it was the no self-awareness, selfish. So that's another good one, right?
On this, the lacking self-awareness one, mm-hmm. I like the asking questions approach. Could you ever, would you see yourself stepping beyond, like even being assumptive of, because sometimes you can read people, and you can tell they're pissed off about something, and you're just like, you're pissed off. Mm-hmm. And like, why are you pissed off? Right. Is that an approach that you've sort of used along lines of questioning to get information and the curiosity, or?
1,000%. So there was definitely a situation where this individual, I would say, lacked that self-awareness, lacked that bedside manner of communication with other people. And unfortunately, it was an individual that was in that leadership role, right? The leadership role that I expect to be the champion of the deal going through integration. And we were on a meeting with other leaders of that firm. So it wasn't just this individual, but this individual was kind of at the top. And the tone was very different from any other meeting. It was very, oh, well, I pushed back on that and they said no, or I don't understand why they're doing this, or this seems really stupid. And it was in front of this group of people. And so I had to take a step back after that conversation because it upset me, right? When I put my trust in you to be the champion of this M&A integration effort, and then you turn around and basically blow it up in one conversation, that hurts me personally. So I took a step back. I gave myself a little bit of time. I walked away. I took a little walk. I processed. And I came back and I wrote an email. And I said, hey, the tone of that conversation seemed really different from any other conversation. Is there something going on that I should know about, right? Is there something that has been left unaddressed? And the response came back and the individual basically said, oh no, like there's just a lot going on in integration right now. I'm like, hey, I'm here to help you. If there are things that you want to talk through, if there are things that maybe we need to find someone else to take that off of your plate, please let me know because I'm here to help support you. So one, making sure that you note that you saw there was a change in the tone, to me, is key to bring a little bit of that self-awareness that other people saw something different in this individual. And then the care and concern of, I care about you as a person. Is there something going on that I either need to know about or I can help with?
We're getting to empathy and good one. The selfish people. I don't know if that same approach would work.
Yeah, maybe not. I still like the questions. I still like kind of making clarifying statements. But to me, with the selfish people is you almost got to build up their ego, right? So even if it was a joint effort to solve a problem, giving the praise and the kudos to that individual to kind of feed the ego, to me, is a way to build a relationship with that selfish person, right? Feed into that, play off of what their natural state is, because you're not going to change them, right? I mean, at this point, it is up to themselves to become the individual that they want to be. So my whole way of doing it is approaching it and trying to use their natural tendencies to get that relationship built.
I like it. Feed into the. You got a good example of that?
I feel like I haven't. The one thing I will say is we do a pretty good job at looking at the culture of the firms as we're going through the prospecting process. So to be perfectly honest, I haven't run into that a whole lot, at least outwardly. So I don't know that I've ever had to, unless I did it without knowing it, I don't know that I've ever had to be in that type of situation, because most of the leaders that we work with are most concerned about their people.
I know a couple of people in the industry like this. I can try it on them. But then the other part of me doesn't want to even engage with them. So,
well, and that's totally fair. And there are, at the end of the day, I have to remember, and this is something that I continually work on, I'm not going to have a relationship with everyone. Not everyone is going to like me. Not everyone's going to like my style. And at some point, then you just have to be resolved to, okay, then we have a professional relationship, right? And it is what it is.
okay, the hard-headed / stubborn people.
Hard-headed, stubborn. We're dealing with a situation-ish like this. I try to take the nice approach first, right? So I try some of those other methods. I try, asking the clarifying questions, digging in a little bit deeper, potentially even playing into maybe what they want. And if I'm not seeing changes, I mean, I basically have to make a decision of, is this worth my effort to continue to try to build this relationship? Or am I going to have to start playing hardball back? And if I have to start playing hardball back, relationship isn't going to develop, right? I know that, but at the end of the day, I have a job to do and we have to get it done. So to me, that's more of almost the lost cause area of, you got to make a tough decision at some point as to whether it is worth your effort to continue to try to build this relationship, or if you just got to go down we have to work together. If you want to play hardball, I'm going to play hardball back.
I like expectation setting.
It kind of is what it is, right? And you have to just know that there are those people out there, and luckily, this is a short-term relationship that we're dealing with more of this hard-headedness. And so I don't necessarily have to care about the long-term impact of not being able to build a relationship with them.
I think we just made a nice little framework on how to deal with assholes.
Yeah, I like it.
So let's try to summarize this into advice that you just give a first-time practitioner.
Yes. Okay. And I have a couple different pieces of advice that I think are really cool for a new time practitioner. So to me, the first piece of advice is, when you get introduced, take the time to get to know the people you're working with. And I caveat that with, if the environment is safe to do so. I can't think of an example where it would be, but I always like to caveat statements because I'm very risk averse. So the best way, in my opinion, to get to know people for who they are is to do it in person. I mean, you can try over Zoom, and yes, you can build positive relationships over Zoom, but there is just something different about being face to face with that individual and looking them in the eye while they're telling you about their life, or while you're telling them about their life. And so to me, making that a priority at the beginning of the deal is going to make overcoming those rough patches way easier. So that's my first piece of advice. Second piece of advice is patience is essential in developing an M&A process, right? I mean, you are going to have people who are stuck inside the box. You're going to have the hard-headed people. You're going to have the self-involved people. You're going to have the resistors. But M&A truly is a continuous improvement journey. Every transaction is different from the last, even if it's only slightly different. And that means that you really want to take the lessons that you're learning from each transaction to make your process better every single time, not just kind of rest on your laurels there. And the third one is my favorite piece of advice. So realize that no deal is going to be a perfect transaction, whether it be integration, due diligence, negotiation. There's this quote that has stuck with me, and I can't for the life of me remember where it came from. But it basically said, if you're looking for perfection, M&A is not for you. I really like that quote, and I wish that I knew where it came from.
Awesome. Well, if anybody knows, reach out. We'll correct it or
Absolutely.
All right. Face to face, patience. No such thing as perfection.
Yep.
I got to ask Nicole, what's the craziest thing you've seen in M&A?
I cannot wait to answer this question because I have heard you ask it on so many podcasts and I had my answer ready. So I got to provide a little context here. So at Wipfli, we have an IT policy that when you're printing, you should be using a multifunction device, right? It's cheaper, it's easier to maintain, it's less, and it's more standard than an individual desktop printer, right? And that's assuming you're in the office. So this was actually, I want to say, maybe my fifth transaction that I had been in the IT space. So we were on site, we had completed our work, over the weekend, everything was going great. We were into support mode kind of on that Monday. And we had an individual storm into our conference room. And of course, what had we removed? The printer from his desk. So during the transactions, we would take away the individual printers and we would set up the big multifunction devices for everyone to be able to securely print, right? Again, less costly for the firm, way easier to maintain, and way easier to support for the individuals. Well, apparently printers are like family to people, especially in the CPA world. So this individual was so upset that he stormed out of the room and actually punched a wall on his way out.
You put a hole in the wall?
I think there was a little hole in the drywall. It was around the corner from where we were, and I was actually over by someone else, and I had just heard the commotion. We learned a bunch of lessons from that from that situation, though, that we needed to regularly communicate, over communication, that we needed to prepare them for the standards of Wipfli as early as we possibly could in the process, allow them to ask questions, and allow them to potentially raise an issue or a problem with the way that we were doing things to potentially receive approval for an outside standard. So I think that is the craziest thing that I have seen in the transaction so far.
That is insane. It's cool that you actually saw it firsthand. It probably was a good learning experience to see a real emotional response.
Yep.
And take that back to integration planning in the early stages.
Absolutely. Yes. And again, we learned a lesson and we adjusted going forward so that hopefully we could avoid that in the future.
Awesome. Nicole, this has been great. I appreciate you taking the time from doing deals to have this conversation, helping me become a better M&A scientist.
Absolutely. Well, I truly appreciate you having me on the podcast. This has been a lot of fun. So happy to help whenever.
Hey, those of you still with us, thank you for sticking through. Until next time, here's to the deal.